So if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, so those are the two pillars that uphold this idea. If it's possible, and it may not be because they might just persecute you no matter what. And as far as it depends on you. So even if they are going to not take the peaceful option, as far as it depends on you, your actions, your thoughts, your disposition, your postures, your tone of voice, the conversations you decide to have and when you decide to have them and what forums you decide to have them on, AKA don't have political fights on Facebook. If it's possible and as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. It's a story that seemed so improbable, and yet we all assumed was going to happen. A Trump versus Biden rematch, the battle of the geriatrics. We have two of the most unlikable politicians by polling data in the world. Now, there are a contingent of people, the people who are all in on MAGA and they wear the hats and everything else, who love Trump, man. I mean, love him, really just feel like he is their advocate. I don't feel like there are people who just love, like would jump in front of a train for Joe Biden. But there are a lot of people who really, really hate Trump. Wow. And that motivates them to kind of go for anyone. And I'm sure there are people who really like Biden as well and who think that he's done a good job. By polling data, President Trump left office with an incredibly low approval rating. Currently, Joe Biden is sitting in office with a historically low approval rating. No one has ever been reelected with an approval rating as low as his. And yet there is still a shot because former President Trump drives the opposition to the polls like no one else we've ever seen. So this is going to be irrationally dysfunctional. And I think we're all just ready for that. There's going to be a lot of anger, but I think we're in a more dire predicament than maybe we even realize. I want to look at two things that happened when Trump won the Iowa caucus. The first thing that happened is it was reported by entrance polls. Almost 2/3 of Iowa caucus goers say Biden 2020 was not legitimate. Biden winning the 2020 election was not a legitimate win. Now, there could be a lot of nuance to that. And within that nuance are all the way from people who think it was outright stolen and ballot boxes were stuffed and, back-end systems on computers were changed, all the way to the other side of the spectrum of people who feel like it was an anomalous period of time, obviously, in 2020 with COVID going on, that a lot of rules changed at the very last minute. We, of course, had the suppression of the Hunter Biden story, which retrospectively, a large enough percentage of people said may have actually changed who they voted for, switched from Biden to Trump because of the corruption potentially within the Biden family. So there are people who say, social media, blocking stories, weird voting, new voting things, all the way to people who are like grand conspiracies of lizard people up high on a mountain changing the actual outcome, right? So it's a wide spectrum of people. Still, almost 2/3 of people who voted in Iowa saying that the current president did not get there legitimately. That's a very, very big deal. You partner that with the reaction in the left side of the media who are not friendly to Trump and how they are treating his win, which it's like everyone knew he's going to win and everyone knew he's going to be the nominee and everyone knew he was going to win Iowa. But he won a majority. He won over 50%. It was a dominant win. And here's almost in real time, MSNBC reacting to what has now become obvious that Trump is going to, in fact, be the Republican nominee.
And the big picture takeaway from that, and I don't mean to be, again, too dark, as you said, on this, but it is not, if we are worried about the rise of authoritarianism in this country, we are worried about potential rise of fascism in this country. We're worried about our democracy falling to an authoritarian and potentially fascist form of government. The leader who is trying to do that is part of that equation. Mm-hmm. But people wanting that is a much bigger part of that equation. Right. And the American electorate is made up of two major parties. One of those parties has been flirting with extremism on the ultra-right for a very long time. They've brought them in a way that they haven't been central to Republican electoral politics ever before. And I know because I've been studying this. But once you have radicalized one major party so that those are the preferences of the people who adhere to your party, the leader's interchangeable. And yes, Trumpism is sometimes what we call it. Mm-hmm. MAGA movement is probably a better way to do it. But but there is an authoritarian movement inside Republican politics that isn't being bamboozled by Trump. They are pushing Trump to get more and more extreme, because the more extreme things he says, the more they adhere to him. And
okay, so you get the point. Basically, to summarize it all, what you will hear over and over again is, if Trump is elected, it's the end of our democracy. Okay, so on one side, you have people, 2/3 of people. I mean, that's a huge majority who are saying Biden didn't actually win it. Whatever that means, whether it means he won, but he only won because social media helped engineer and suppress stories, and there was, more mail-in ballots, and it went against, the norms, or they actually stole it. The lizard people stole it, right? So that's one side who's saying the guy right now who's going to be running again didn't get there legitimately, and you better believe we are not going to put up with another illegitimate election. Then you have the people on the other side who, some of them still think 2016 was illegitimate, that Russia somehow put Trump in, and they believe that he is genuinely a threat to our democracy. Now, sure, he already was president, and he fell into some rabbit hole of very strange, specious legal theories where he thought that he could still somehow win after he had lost. Yes, January 6th was very ugly, but he did leave. He did transfer power. And so we're saying, but if he got in this time, then he definitely wouldn't. All that to say, our real issue is we are set up for whatever happens in the 2024 election. If Biden wins or if Trump wins, half of the country is just not going to accept it.
Wow.
Now, what can realistically they do about it? I don't know. Complain, protest, riot. But at the end of it, we are setting ourselves up. We're just like stuffing the powder keg full of more and more and more gunpowder, and just going, I wonder what will happen in 2024 when one of the two people that the other side has no capacity to believe could be legitimately elected. You have Trump now, who's facing 91 charges. Every time he sneezes, he catches another case. And so you have half of the country saying they are using the Department of Justice in order to target a political enemy. And then when you listen to the left, they're saying if Donald Trump gets in, he will use the Department of Justice to target his enemies. Both sides are just in a situation where it feels like they are not going to accept what comes next. We are primed for more turmoil, more consternation, more infighting, more potential real political violence in this year's election than in anything we've seen in our lifetimes. We can look back to 2016 and the shock. No one thought Trump could win. And then 2020, just the lunacy that followed that entire, remember, and maybe we blocked that whole thing out because COVID was so terrible, but it was not great. And there was so much division. And man, more people have stopped talking to family members. More people have cut off lifelong friends. More people won't return a text from a college roommate because of Trump than anything I've ever seen. Truly, we have fallen in where politics is now our religion. And it's no longer just religions, but the people who really are just living and breathing in the political realm, it's like cults. And when someone questions the dogma of your cult, it's not that you're frustrated with them. It's that you freaking cut them out of your life.
Wow.
And so if we're living there, then we are set up for less peace, more turmoil, and this could get very, very interesting. And so I'm not really interested for this segment in parsing, who's right and who's wrong and how we should feel about this on the political level. What really is heavy on my heart is how we should be approaching this as believers. As believers, we have a higher call. At MetaChurch, where I'm the lead pastor, we talk all the time about having a pilgrim's perspective. And that is the proper way to orient your life if you have put your faith in Jesus. Paul said to the Corinthians that if anyone is in Christ, behold, he's a new creation. The old has gone. And this is the language of metamorphosis, not a slight change, not now you wear a Christian t-shirt, like from caterpillar to butterfly, an entirely new creation. and that now we are actually ambassadors of God on the earth, which means that we are sent from a foreign land to this earth, and this earth is no longer our home. And we see this in the language of the apostles, which were some of the men who spent time with Jesus. Peter talks about Christ followers as aliens and exiles, like aliens, like foreigners and exiles to this land. That is the appropriate way to view ourselves on the earth. And it doesn't mean we don't have political ideas, and it doesn't mean we don't have political commitments, and it doesn't mean we don't exercise our rights. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means none of those earthly bound rights get to supersede our spiritual instructions given from our true home, which is with Jesus. And so I want to remind you a few things. In Romans, which Paul's writing to the church in Rome, they're being fed to the frickin' lions in the Colosseum. Like, they're experiencing political persecution as bad as you may think you have it because you're a Trump supporter, or as bad as you may think you have it because you're a Biden supporter. You have nothing on the people that Paul is writing to. And in Romans 12:18, he says, if it is possible, and as far as it depends on you, those are both really, really good qualifiers, live at peace with everyone. Sometimes it's not possible to live at peace because someone, no matter what you do, is going to create chaos and turmoil. They're going to persecute, poke, and prod at you no matter what. So if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, so those are the two pillars that uphold this idea. If it's possible, and it may not be because they might just persecute you no matter what, and as far as it depends on you. So even if they are going to not take the peaceful option, as far as it depends on you, your actions, your thoughts, your disposition, your postures, your tone of voice, the conversations you decide to have and when you decide to have them and what forums you decide to have them on, aka don't have political fights on Facebook. If it's possible, and as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone, because as important as you think your political message probably is, and maybe it is, as important as you think it is, it pales in comparison to how important it is to tell people the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. Timothy says the same thing, or Paul gives Timothy the same instructions in 1 Timothy 2. I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. And I wonder how many Christians, and the way our country breaks down now, there certainly are Democrat Christians, but the majority of Christians, are characterized as being on the right. I wonder how many Christians are actively praying for President Biden, praying for Vice President Harris. I wonder how many people were praying for Trump who are on the left when Trump was in office, or even praying for him right now, because we have a higher goal, which is living peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. And Jesus, of course, said, blessed are the peacemakers, right? That's what we're called to be. And of course, the highest call is to love your neighbor as yourself. This is what Jesus said. All the law and all the prophets hang on these commands. Love the Lord your God with all that you have, and love your neighbor as yourself. The prophet Jeremiah was writing to the Israelites when they were under Babylonian captivity. They were actually living in Babylon. And he has this beautiful passage in Jeremiah 29. It's often misquoted, but I want to put it in its proper context here. In verse 4, this is what the Lord of armies, the God of Israel, says to all the exiles I deported from Jerusalem to Babylon. This is what he says: build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Find wives for yourselves and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters to men in marriage, so they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there. Do not decrease. Pursue the well-being of the city I've deported you to. Pray to the Lord on its behalf, for when it thrives, you will thrive. And so if we are strangers and exiles, if we are pilgrims passing through, it's not like just sit and wait and die and go to heaven, right? Like, you're here as an ambassador. You're an ambassador, and your main assignment is reconciliation. Reconciling people, not back to Donald Trump and not to Joe Biden, reconciling people back to Jesus Christ. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure you check out the full podcast and subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all new content. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. Link is in the description below.